Terraria is somehow the most chaotic but controlled game I have ever seen, giving the player an insane amount of freedom in its world generation, progression paths and unique RPG system. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about the game design techniques that actually make this possible. So, spoiler warning from this point onwards guys, and welcome to the Anatomy of Terraria. Our story follows you across a procedurally generated world where you and a band of budding adventurers traverse through caverns, caves and catacombs on your journey to unearth unknown horrors below and unseat the gods themselves, but also build yourself a nice little cottage to retire into once you're done. So for anyone who doesn't already know, Terraria is a procedurally generated sandbox role-playing building game, and one of its biggest strengths is in keeping the gameplay interesting and varied, even though at its core it can be very repetitive, and it does this through its careful use of its progression cycles. So when you first start Terraria, you're plopped into the middle of the map with no obvious goals and very little guidance. You might start off by staving off the horrors of the night or building yourself some shelter, but the most obvious long-term goal the game presents you is to explore. And going in either direction, the player will quickly come across a set of new biomes, like the desert, Crimson or the jungle, that harbour enemies that will most likely kill them repeatedly, giving the player a new, simple, short-term goal: get stronger. So if exploring outwards is no longer an option, the next place to go is down, as you delve deep into the underground caverns in search of ore and treasure to arm yourself, making it possible to take on ever more horrific bosses, which each give you a boost in power, allowing for you to access harder bosses, biomes and better gear. And this cycle repeats itself until the final moments of the game, transforming you from a peasant with nothing to a devourer of gods, atop a kingdom of your own design. But why is this simple and, let's be real, repetitive cycle so engaging? Well, it's because every single step in this progression cycle is a set of short-term goals. We introduce short-term goals in the Anatomy of Stardew Valley. Because of how simple and clear these goals are, they keep the player engaged and moving forward to the next set of short-term goals, providing a constant drip feed of rewards and progress. Another side effect of this is how it holds the player's attention to the world itself. In many games, they have sprawling, gorgeous, but empty vistas. But Terraria's progression system keeps the player's attention on every single pixel, looking for certain ores, chests, or summoning items needed to progress. This keeps the player fully enveloped in the world itself. Since a lot of these short-term goals are based around exploring and finding things, the world has been randomized on each playthrough to make sure that the player is still able to experience engaging exploration even if they've already played the game before. But if the world is randomized, how have the developers managed to pull off a balanced difficulty curve throughout this world? Well, the answer lies in Terraria's seeds. Terraria's worlds are procedurally generated, and this is one of the game's main draws. Every time the player begins a new game, it will generate a massive and seemingly random world. And there are two big fat quotation marks on the word seemingly there, because when people think of procedural generation, they equate it to randomness, and this isn't the case. There is a difference between random and procedural. It's in the name itself. It's a procedure. It's a list of tasks that need to take place in an order. A world that is procedurally generated has a random starting point, and this is called a seed. And then it follows a set procedure to create the world around that seed. And it's this procedure that determines how random your world generation actually is, including rules for how big cave structures could be, how likely it is for ores to spawn, or where each biome should go. And in Terraria's case, it has a fairly tight procedure. It will pick a random location to place, say, the jungle biome, and then develop random cave systems inside, but always placing, say, a jungle temple and a place to hide your mum inside these caverns. Hello! This set of rules for how to generate the world happens for every single biome, loot location, or hidden NPC. All of this combined comes together to create this sprawling and vast world, but makes the overall structure of the map predictable to experienced players, while always keeping things like ore nodes and chests surprising and exciting. This keeps people coming back time and time again. A problem that can arise with such a vast and open world is that you risk leaving the player not knowing what to do next. If stuck, the only way the player can be informed on what to do next is through the guide's cryptic hints. Oh yeah, very helpful.
Oi, what you doing? What you doing?
Oh, fuck.
Oh mate, just use the wiki. Just use the wiki, it's what it's there for.
What are you on about? Why should I have to go to an external site to figure out what to do? Why can't I just figure it out myself?
Oh mate, it's got everything you could ever want. It's got wikis on spiders, on turtles, on elephants.
Wait, there aren't even any elephants in Terraria. You do know that?
Well, I know it's just a separate wiki on elephants.
Dude, how is any of that relevant?
Oh mate, you're always...
Oh, not again.
Putting me down, mate, you knob.
I introduced this problem in the Anatomy of Hollow Knight, and Terraria is unfortunately also a wiki game, requiring the player to look up what to do unless they're willing to go through a heap of trial and error. But this is kind of inevitable in a game so vast and so freeing. But that's not to say that the developers at Relogic didn't attempt to counter this in a way that doesn't compromise on this freedom. So we mentioned one of the problems can be that the guide is our only guide on how to progress, but this can also be a benefit. All hints that are given to the player give a direction and not a specific destination, making sure that the player always has an idea of where to explore, but still lets them feel like they are actually discovering these things naturally on their own. Relogic also use known short-term goals to drive players towards new, unknown goals. Their need for iron drives them deep into the caverns below, but accidentally breaking into a den of crimson with beating hearts pulsating in its fetid crevices. What are these hearts and what do they do? Because there are so many things to discover and do, the player cannot go in the wrong direction. Casting such a wide net encourages the player towards these paths of progression naturally. But even if you decide to just sit around and build your dream home and only do a little bit of conservative exploring, certain bosses have a chance to just spawn themselves to forcibly guide you to this progression. All of this freedom is heightened by its procedural generation and can't go wrong progression system. It's a wonderful attempt to fix this wiki problem. But what I want to know is, what do you think? Was this enough to keep you engaged with the game itself without having to look at external sites to figure out what to do next? I'd love to hear your thoughts on your first experiences playing Terraria. Come and talk to me in the comments below. Right, back to the video. To accompany this form of freedom in its world design, Relogic have also revolutionized its RPG class system with its natural role diversification. When first starting most RPGs, the game forces the player to make the most important decision of the entire game right out of the gate. What class to play, based on small description boxes and expectations. But Terraria is different. Well, no, don't get me wrong, Terraria does have standard RPG classes, be it sword and board tanks, archers, wizards, or summoner. But the beauty is in how Terraria allows the player to be completely free with its variable class system. Early on, the player can find weapons hidden throughout the world in chests or just make them themselves through crafting. Because of this, it allows the player to try out these weapons at their own pace. Then, once they've taken down their first few bosses, new armor sets will give certain bonuses for specific weapon types, like increased mana regeneration for wizards or increased amount of minions for summoners. This naturally lets the player figure out what type of weapons and playstyle they enjoy the most before they commit to a class to play for the rest of the game, being able to change their mind at any point as well. This also works in multiplayer too. Because some of the best weapons in the game can only be found randomly while exploring or have an incredibly low chance of dropping from bosses, and so players are going to have to share this loot between them. So it makes sense for only one person to specialise in a certain class or weapon type. This then encourages players to have diverse builds and play different classes, but doesn't force them to make this choice before they've discovered what they and their friends enjoy the most. And this role diversification exists outside of combat too. While building and taking care of your home, there are multiple roles to take care of, like a potions master, a fisherman, and chest bitch. It's just natural in multiplayer for one person to fall into one of these jobs while playing, allowing players to create their own unique corner of the world, personalised to them, their role and personality through its boundless building system. One of the things I have neglected to cover up until this point is Terraria's focus on building. The game allows for the player to design and build structures to house their NPCs, armour and chests, or just build whatever they want. This is all completely optional, but the game does attempt to encourage the player to dabble in it. Certain bosses are much easier to fight if you build an arena to fight them in, and NPCs reward the player for building their personal housing in biomes that they would like. And this encourages the player to build unique and diverse buildings all over the world that they might not otherwise. But what all of this comes down to is ludic play. Ludic play is creating your own fantasy and fun outside of the game's natural progression. So building my own personal little retreat on the beach and playing out that fantasy of the lonely fisherman is ludic play for me, but your type of ludic play might look completely different. Anyway, Terraria's building system is a perfect catalyst to allow players to experience this type of play. Due to the laws decreed by the old ones, I can never make a Minecraft episode, so if that is something that you want, just listen to this section of the video again and just watch some Minecraft Let's Plays, and that's about as close as you're ever going to get to the anatomy of Minecraft. Back to the video. If there is one thing that unifies every aspect of Terraria's design, it would be freedom. Freedom to play, explore and build however the player wants, allowing for them to create their own fun within their own world. And I think as designers, that is something we should all be aspiring to. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. And the next one coming up on the channel is going to be the Anatomy of Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, so stay tuned for that. And a big thank you to Laxo, Vostia, Pixel and Commissar Walrus for helping me film this episode. I wouldn't have been able to do it without you, so thank you. And if you do enjoy this series and you want to help support me, please consider joining this wonderful team of people on Patreon and YouTube members. Thank you so much for the support, mate. I'll see you in the next one.